Hello, Data Standard community. I'm your host, Shayna Weldon, and this is the Data Standard audio experience. Today, we are bringing you a special guest. Seth Levine is here. He is a senior machine learning scientist at Lars AI. Lars AI is an AI assistant for text-based conversations. Wow. Welcome to the show, Seth.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
It is great to have you. Thank you for coming on the show today. To start off, can you please just introduce yourself?
Sure. Well, my name's Seth Levine from New York. I have a wide range of interests from human behavior to machine learning, sports and athletics. I've worked in a wide range of areas from web development, graphic design. I was a tutor for a long time. I actually worked as a basketball coach for almost a decade. I've launched two companies, one of them during my undergraduate at University of Pennsylvania, which was a really great experience. Yeah, so that's the short intro.
So what was your career journey in getting to where you are today?
Yeah, it's definitely been a journey. So I think from when I was young, I just really like solving problems, any types of problems. Math obviously attracted me, the sciences, and I ended up going to University of Pennsylvania, started out doing systems engineering. I ended up doing an individualized major there, minored in math. After school, I did some entrepreneurship stuff. I ended up taking some machine learning classes back in 2015, 2016, the classic, Andrew Ng machine learning. And it just totally really opened my mind up. And I haven't stopped learning about machine learning since. I ended up going back to school, getting a master's in computer science with a focus in machine learning. One thing kind of led to the other. I was doing some consultant work in NLP, and I landed a position at Lars, where I'm at now.
Wow, that is a journey. For your undergrad, what was the experience for you at UPenn?
Yeah, so as I was saying, I started out doing systems engineering. So I was in the engineering school there, and I liked it. It was a large focus on electrical engineering. You could pick if you wanted to do like financial and economic systems, and I wasn't sure, where I necessarily wanted to focus my studies. And I decided, well, actually, my sophomore year, I started and I took a class, Human Evolution, with an unbelievable professor, Dr. Janet Monge. And I guess it's maybe a cliche, but it changed my life. That was what I was really passionate about, human behavior, human evolution. And I ended up getting approved for an individualized major to study complex human behavior and evolution. I know that's a mouthful. In a nutshell, it's the combination of psychology, philosophy, anthropology with systems engineering and computer science. Yeah, so I studied, for my thesis there, I studied the evolution of intelligence. I learned so many interesting things. I looked at the brain as a dynamic adaptive system. What really attracted to me was just realizing that there was no framework to understand the brain, right? There's so much neuroscience, so much research that's been done, but it's one of these challenges that has not been solved. Many different fields try to create theories about it, but they all have their own lexicons. They all have their different ways of talking about it. And there's no unifying theory. And by exploring people that have studied it in the past, I learned so much. I think that there were misconceptions, that there's a sensory cortex and that there's a motor cortex, but meanwhile, they're happening at the same time. You're sensing and you're moving at the same time, and they're interactive. The idea of senses, your senses are intertwined. The way you perceive things, the way you view things, it has a lot to do with predicting patterns that you're seeing around you. And in terms of being attracted to solving problems, it was a really amazing problem to try to even just scratch the surface and try to solve.
That is so neat. I can tell the excitement when you're talking about this major. I hear it. So then you got a master's. What was that?
Yes. Yeah, so after my undergraduate, I was working, doing a couple of things. I knew I wanted to do entrepreneurship. I knew I wanted to be on the technical side of things. And I went back and I got a master's in computer science at NYIT. I did a focus in machine learning. The most interesting work that I did there, well, I guess two things. I got very interested in actually computer vision. I started doing things with face detection, face recognition. One of my software engineering classes, a team of ours, we worked on a media player that was controlled by your face. So if you were looking, it would be playing. If you looked away, then it would stop playing.
Really?
Yeah. So that was a great project. And as I was sort of getting into computer vision, I took a biometrics class with Dr. Kiran Balagani, unbelievable professor, really great guy. And it ended up leading into a research opportunity. I became a machine learning researcher. We were looking at basically like behavioral biometrics that my professor and Dr. Paolo Gasti, my other advisor, they developed a way of authenticating people on their phone based off of the way they hold their phone, based off the way they walk with their phone. You create a sort of signature and everyone has their own signature and you can use that to authenticate, to make smartphones more secure. What I ended up doing was figuring out when that mechanism should kick in, right? So if you change possession, if the phone changes possession, it should check, it should try to re-authenticate. So we did this experiment where people were walking around with their phones. Someone would grab the phone from them. You'd give the phone to someone. They went through like a series of, different behaviors. And we were collecting accelerometer data, we were collecting gyroscope data and a couple other signals. And we wanted to figure out a way of identifying when those behaviors were taking place. So basically, when were those change of possession behaviors taking place? In my data exploration, I ended up looking at it through a sort of like time frequency visualization called a scaleogram. It creates these really wild images. And at the time, I was reading a lot about AlexNet and some of the breakthroughs in computer vision. And I thought activity recognition is not like a solved problem, not that computer vision and image classification is, but there were major strides. And I thought, hey, maybe we can apply some of that to try to identify these behaviors. So I ended up taking the images for the give events and the grab events that were taking place on the phone, getting those scalograms, and then training an image classifier, and it ended up working, really well.
Oh my goodness, what?
Yeah.
Wow. So then what brought you to Loris? Where's that connection?
Yeah, so Loris is a company where we lead with empathy. We want to create better conversations. We're a spin-off of Crisis Text Line, which is basically an outlet for people when they're going through crisis. They can text in and they can get the support that they need. Through that, they developed all these techniques of how to train people through text. And, they realized that there are certain techniques that you can use to deal with people when they're going through like hot emotional states. And we wanted to figure out a way, how can we take some of these learnings and apply it to the business world to make things better for customers, to make things better for customer service agents, to make things better for, anyone, just making interactions better. That's what drives us. So a lot of the work that we're doing is conversational AI, which is another arm of machine learning and deep learning. And I got very interested in natural language processing. After I finished my machine learning research at NYIT, I ended up working as an NLP consultant for a marketing firm. And then I got connected with the CEO here. And one thing led to another. I started out as a data scientist. And now I'm sort of leading the efforts on the data science, NLP, machine learning front here.
So when you're saying you're leading the front and your current role, what exactly does that mean? Like, what do you do exactly?
Yeah. So, what are the problems that people are facing in customer service? I mean, there's a huge paradigm shift, not a paradigm shift, but there's a huge shift that's taking place right now. Everyone's going digital, right? There's so many more conversations that are taking place in chat, over text and SMS. And chatbots are great. You know, chatbots can solve some of your problems, but I think that anyone that has talked or interacted with a chatbot knows that there are just certain problems that can't be solved solely by a chatbot, right? So let's just say that a chatbot can handle 50% of your problems. Then the human, the customer service agent, is left with the hardest 50% of the problems. But you don't need to leave the human on their own. You can take those same insights, the same amazing breakthroughs that have been taking place that have allowed chatbots to become, as incredible as they're becoming. And you can take those insights and you can make it easier for agents to do their job. You can extract insights. So, for example, a message comes in, you can detect what's the sentiment, right? Is this person very dissatisfied? Is this person very satisfied? Sentiment is a very subjective thing, but you can do your best to predict what it's going to be. Another thing that we're interested in is intent, right? So basically, why is the customer contacting the company? Based off of the words that they're using, we can sort of infer what's their intent, and then we can provide suggestions for the agent. So our product, that one part of it is this real-time offering. As the conversation is taking place, we're rating sentiment. We can see the trajectory of sentiment over time. We can pick up dialogue acts. For example, what role is each utterance? Utterance is just the messages is playing in the conversation. And you start to pick up patterns. And you can associate these patterns with positive outcomes. And you could start to figure out what are the things that are going to lead to the highest probability of having a good conversation. And through this, with this software, this real-time software, there are other consequences. It's making agents faster. They can respond quicker. They can handle more chats at once. We've seen that as volume has increased, that there's more incoming chat. When companies are using Loris, they're more prepared and they're more able to handle that increase in volume. So we've had really great success so far, and our offering continues to expand.
So at Loris, how was your experience with the company?
I love working at Loris. It's an unbelievable team of passionate, smart people that live, what we're saying. We want to make better conversations. We want to lead with empathy. And that's the team that we've created. So it's a great culture. We try to solve really hard problems. When I used to talk to advisors, career service people, they would say what do you want to do? And I would say to them, I want to work with a smart team and I want to solve challenging problems. They would say, you're too idealistic. They would say, you don't need to love your job, you just have to like your job. I guess I'm just fortunate in the sense that I found a fit for me where I can love my job and I can work with a smart group of people on challenging problems.
Yeah, I think it's so important to have your work really create the best of you and be in a space that just thrives. And it sounds like you have that at Loris.
Yeah.
And then moving towards your projects, how do you incorporate AI and ML to your current projects and that you're working on?
Yeah, sure. So 3 of the main things that we work on are sentiment, intent, and dialogue acts. So for each of those, we train machine learning models. Sentiment, there's a lot of sentiment engines out there. There's open source, Google has, Amazon, IBM. But it's very tricky to try to figure out sentiment within a conversation, right? Because depending on what the other person says, it can really change. Even something as simple as okay, right? Or something like when they ask you in the end of a customer service conversation, like, is there anything else, right? And then you say, no, that's it. That's tricky to try to figure out what the sentiment is. So for us, we're always trying to incorporate context. What messages matter and influence the sentiment of that message, and the way that we sort of are attacking it, one of our approaches is through dialogue acts.
Well, what's an easy example of noticing sentiment?
Oh, yeah. I mean, if they say like, "Oh, great, thank you for all your help," things like
Okay.
that. It's really just finding times when they're not complaining.
Yeah, okay. I
Yeah.
would think the hardest part is trying to, I guess, pick out the sarcasm
Oh
because,
God.
yeah, I don't know how do you do that? Because I can't tell sarcasm if it's coming
So,
through a text. It's
yeah,
difficult.
sarcasm, it's two things, right? Its tone is so important, right? Because when you speak it, you can tell, but you don't have tone for text. And then also you don't get like you unless you're incorporating context, right? Like I have such a huge problem, you haven't helped me at all. And then in the next problem, like they say something and they're like, well, thanks for nothing.
Okay.
It's like, oh yeah, like how are you going to get that? We call one of our tests for sentiment was called the thanks for nothing test. Like, can our sentiment model get that correctly? Um,
So this is a common term that people text. Thanks for nothing.
oh, it happens. It
Oh,
happens. Yeah.
oh, they. Okay. How are you applying AI and ML to your current role and current projects that you're working on?
Yeah, absolutely. So, three of the main projects that we work on are sentiment, intent, and dialogue acts. One of the first projects that I worked on was creating a sentiment engine. It's very easy to create a binary classifier. Is this positive or is this negative? But sometimes that's not as fine grained as you want it to be. We have a little more of an in-depth. One part of our sentiment model. It's a 5-tier sentiment model. And it's tricky, trying to figure out sentiment within a conversation, right? Because you could say the same text, but based off of what the history of what happened in that conversation, the context, the sentiment could be totally different. So how we're attacking this problem, one approach that we have are through dialogue acts. Dialogue acts are defined as basically like the role that message plays in the conversation. So that could be as simple as something like, hi, that's a greeting. Thank you so much for all your help. That would be gratitude. These sort of social acts in customer service. There's a lot of complaints, obviously, and that's where intent comes in as well. So we can pick up, okay, this person is complaining, this person is asking a question, but what's that question about? What are they complaining about? And if you can start to figure out their intent, why did they start this conversation? What are they trying to get out of it? Then you could start to figure out, especially in combination with sentiment, dialogue act, and intent, what's the best thing that the agent should say in this situation? There's a lot of companies out there where they connect to knowledge bases, right? But knowledge bases aren't enough, right? Because just surfacing what the right article is, that doesn't give you the ability to share that information in a digestible way, right? You're
Wait,
having a chat.
what is a knowledge base?
Oh, sorry. Yeah. So a knowledge base is, you could think of it as, sometimes it's frequently asked questions. Sometimes it's, the articles that a company has about their policies. Sometimes it could be internal, some policies that the company has internally. So the knowledge base is basically something that is used by customer service agents to help deal with the problems that are coming in.
Okay.
And one of the issues that some customer service agents have is, quickly getting that information. Another approach that some companies take is just analyzing historical data and just trying to see what were the patterns that took place there when there was this similar query, what historically have agents said, but there's a problem. You don't necessarily know if that was the best thing to say. What was the outcome of that conversation? Which brings me to the next thing that we work on. There are a couple metrics that are used to figure out, the quality of conversations, the quality of a company. One being CSAT. CSAT is short for customer satisfaction, the percentage of your customers that are satisfied. But how could you ever begin to figure that out, right? You could ask a survey after. When do you ask the survey? After a successful conversation? The survey response rate is between 5 and 15%. So you have a bias there. Only a select few people are doing it. And then also, how do you separate if the customer is upset about an offering or a product, or if they're upset about the interaction. And this is active research that we're doing. Yeah.
That is so neat. What's the greatest challenge with doing these chat boxes and the dialogue, in your opinion?
So yeah, AI is filled with challenges, filled with trade-offs. It has very high expectations, right? People look into, they read about GPT-3 and they think, oh, wow, like, this is the next generation of things that are going to happen. Meanwhile, it's just another iterative step in this process. There's been tons of models. From a philosophy standpoint, I think that the biggest challenge is basically, okay, you want this AI system to behave in this certain way, right? You want it to predict sentiment, or you want to predict the outcome of a conversation, or anything. But how do you operationalize that? How do you make it in a way that a machine learning model could understand that this is correct, this is not correct? And I think that this is something that's been studied on like a larger scale. It's called the AI alignment problem. If people are interested in it, they should read like Brian Christian. I could never begin to start to address these problems like he has. On another level, some of the challenges that we face are, implementation. I think there's a lot of focus on the machine learning model, the language model, the algorithms that are being used, but that's just one piece of the puzzle, right? So another huge thing is the data. There's a big movement right now for data-centric machine learning, and that's basically like the better your training data, the better the data you have to evaluate your model, the better performance that you're going to have. And then there's implementation, right? So it's great to have a machine learning model in a Colab notebook, a Jupyter notebook, a Python script on your local machine, or wherever, but it's a whole other story when you put it into production. You can try, but you can never fully predict or understand what production data is going to be like until you put it into production. And then that's another part. That's like ML ops, figuring out how your machine learning model is performing in production. And then you can leverage that to then improve your model in the future. So there's a lot of challenges, and that's sort of what attracts me to the field. So yeah.
What a great answer. That's what I'd say. Yeah. So we just talked about the industry, and before we talked about academics. What's the greatest difference between studying in industry or working in industry versus in academics?
It's such a great question, and it's something that I think a lot of people are really interested in, because on all those job descriptions, they always say like you should have a PhD, in machine learning, and that's someone who's coming obviously from years of being in academia and industry. Basically, it's the time horizons, right? So for academia, for me, I spent upwards of 1.5 years on that one problem, right? How can I figure out what behavior the smartphone, how can I identify those activities? Meanwhile, at Loris, we have business needs. We have to get machine learning models into production. We have to be improving our offering. So that 18 months of discovery, figuring out the problem, reworking the problem, is condensed. And it's in an exciting way, because you can create a machine learning model, and then pretty quickly you can then see how it's performing. So I think in industry, it's about the questions, right? It's about, are you asking the right question? Are you creating something? I mean, this is always important, like that can be reproduced. Do you understand what happens if you change some of the features that you're looking at? And, really just understanding all of the ins and outs of it. And it's lots of discussions with professors, and fascinating ones. And then, you build up, and you have to defend your thesis. In industry, you have to produce, you have to create, and you have to be doing things that are going to impact your business. So the priorities are a little bit different, and the main difference are the timelines. 18 months turns into about 2 weeks or 4 weeks.
Why shortener right there? Wow. So You've shared so much, and I want to make sure those that are listening can connect with you. So how can they?
Yeah, so you can definitely connect with me on LinkedIn. You should be able to find me, Seth Levine, Lars. I think that'll do the trick. If you're interested in any of the complex human behavior and evolution, that sort of stuff, I do have a blog. Maybe we'll put a link in the description. And check out Lars, Loris.ai. If you're interested in data science, machine learning, NLP, any of the things that I've been talking about, feel free to reach out. Simple email, Seth@loris.ai.
Sounds great. Sounds great. And then for more information on the data standard, you can find us at www.datastandard.io. This episode was also sponsored by Pandio for innovating the tech space. You can learn more about their work at pandio.com. But Seth, thank you again for being here and for sharing and for giving us your knowledge. It was a pleasure having you.
Thank you so much. Loved it.